Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is M.H. Murray, a writer and director whose first feature, I Don't Know Who You Are, stars Mark Clennon as a Toronto artist who's sexually assaulted and then must spend a harrowing weekend racing around the city trying to raise $900 for a course of treatment to prevent HIV infection. It's a terrific debut, and I'm overjoyed to be introducing its world premiere at TIFF this Thursday, September 7th at 9:30 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, with a second show Friday, September 8th at 10 p.m. Come and join us. MH picked Three Colors Blue, the first film in Krzysztof Kieślowski's brilliant trilogy of dramas inspired by the themes of the French flag, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Blue is about liberation, sort of, starring Juliette Binoche as Julie, a woman who survives a car wreck that kills her husband and daughter and wants nothing more than to disappear into her own grief. But life keeps pulling at her, and a series of discoveries will challenge everything Julie thought she knew about her husband and marriage. It's an exquisite character study structured around Binoche's aching, wide-open performance and the starting point of a trilogy that's one of the finest ever created. If you know, you know. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, it's my favorite movie, so it's a pretty simple answer. It was a big inspiration, for me doing my first film and also just as a filmmaker and person. I think Blue is so aesthetically interesting, formally interesting, but also I really love all the characters, but especially the main character and just some of the decisions and the way that she deals with such a traumatic situation, I think is really inspiring and also relatable to me, and the way that I have dealt with, things and what you do with life when, it's all like falling apart around you. And, I really like the idea of, how does a human react, or what does a human do when everything is falling down around them, but then the logistics of life continue, like, oh, you have to deal with money, you have to deal with your neighbors, you can't actually really like fully, like, you have to, if you're going to stay alive, you have to engage. I think Blue is all about like the character kind of trying to retreat away. I think there's even I think she says, I can't remember the exact dialogue, but she says she basically wants to do nothing, be nobody, and she can't. Like, she tries, but then all these things like come trickling in, like her feelings and her past and her future and all these things, and I think it's like a sad movie, but it's weirdly hopeful, sort of, in a sort of twisted way, I think.
Oh, I think so. I think the thing that Kieślowski is trying to tell us, and certainly trying to tell Julie in the course of the film, is that life won't let you leave it. That there's a sort of a cruelty to the way that it's presented, right? Because she's lost her husband, she's survived this thing she didn't want to survive because she can't imagine what her future looks like. Mm-hmm. And every attempt she makes, as you say, like all her attempts to negate herself fail. But it's not because she isn't doing what it's so weird. There's no sense of blame, right? Like, it's not that she's not trying hard enough to isolate herself. She could go to a cabin in the woods if she wanted to, but it doesn't occur to her because it's grief, right? Like, she's deaf and blind to so many things that are happening. And then she tries to sustain that situation and it doesn't work because you can't help but see the world around you. And It is a hopeful film, I think. Yeah. She's drawn back to life, to the idea of living just by inertia, right? Like, I think it's given the other two films in the series, one is about somebody who's trying to reconnect with someone who no longer wants him. And then Red is just this weird, complex tapestry of interaction and how everyone is in some way responsible for the people around them. Starting with Blue, starting from this point, especially at a time, I'm thinking about seeing it 30 years ago and realizing, like, I had no idea where the other two films were going. There was no context. We didn't even know we knew they were coming, but we didn't know they existed or what they would be like.
Interesting.
And this singular experience does feel like his thesis statement for his entire cinema, which is that we need each other even when we don't want to.
I love that. I love that.
Well, thank you. And I was trying to figure this out. You probably weren't old enough to see it the first time, right? When it was in theaters. So when did you come to it? When did you find it?
Girl, I was literally born the year it came out.
Oh
So
dear God, now I feel old.
I feel like on some weird level, that's why I have such a soft spot for it. Or like when I was, I like to look at cinema from different years in the past and just kind of see what was going on that year. And there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in 1993. But I think Three Colors Blue, I don't know, it just stands out to me as something so special and so like I don't know, like timeless. I feel like and I think the score of that movie is literally the best. I don't know, I don't want to be like too dramatic, but for me, it's the best film score of all time, I think. And I think it's just such a really deceptively simple score in the sense that a lot of the time when you listen to it, there's only a couple things happening. Like maybe one instrument, sometimes it's just a flute, sometimes it's, a harp or whatever, and then sometimes it's an orchestra, but it's not like overly complex. And I think it's within that simplicity that that score just like really shines.
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out. Initially, I thought it was her husband reaching out for her somehow, that there was some supernatural quality to it. But the more time I spent with it, the more it seems that it really is just the film itself. That it's not. I guess because of films like Blind Chance or The Double Life of Veronique, I wanted there to be a supernatural component, or I was expecting there to be something here that was about a ghost. But she's haunted by herself more than anything else. She's haunted by the things she didn't do and the choices she didn't make and the things she wants to do and won't.
Mm.
But the film itself feels like it's trying to coax her back to life, as though the camera is making the music somehow. At least that was my last take on it.
I think that there is a supernatural element from all three films. Like, I think maybe it's more apparent in Red. Like, there's something kind of, I think, a supernatural, a bunch of stuff happening in Red that is not just, I mean, I don't think my interpretation of it is not like, oh, chance, or just this is just how things happen. I think there
Mm-hmm.
is like a reason why, spoiler alert, they all end up on the same boat or
On the
whatever.
ferry, yeah.
And so
Well, they specifically they survive. They're the ones
yeah,
who
they
will
survive,
survive.
and Julie is at the courtroom when the guy from White is there with his Julie Delpy,
Yep.
and I think there's such great little connections that I love thinking about it. I don't have an answer, and probably hopefully never will because I like exploring it, but just the juxtaposition of like chance or fate versus just randomness. And I think these films, like one of the main things I get from them is this, like, I don't know, I guess maybe supernatural is not the right word, but the connection of certain people to each other, like, even if it doesn't make logical or logistical sense, like, the elderly woman and when she's walking by and Julie's just on the bench, and we're made to feel through the way that it's shot that whether it's a metaphor for like greater society or not, like there's some sort of connection between these two people in this moment that they don't even know about or that we don't really understand, but it's still there. Um, and that's the same thing, kind of like what you're saying with through the music. Her husband is still kind of there, and she's still pissed at him, and you know, through this woman, this pregnant woman, his mistress, she is like able to connect with him, kind of like it's like this super twisted, beautiful thing that to me does I feel like it is a little bit magical in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I guess continuity, like the concept of continuity, that
Mm.
Patrice is gone and their child is gone, but there is a woman carrying his child, and
Yeah.
that's not insignificant,
Hmm.
right? Even though it is something that that Julie should be horrified by and angered by.
Mm.
The context of the discovery changes everything and means that it's somehow positive, that there is continuation of the person that she lost. And I mean, I was 25 when I saw it, and I remember sitting in a tiny screening room that's no longer there, underneath what I think is now a Pottery Barn on Bloor Street, at the old
Oh,
Famous Players screening room, which is where they showed us all the Alliance films. Like all the Miramax movies were screened in this dinky little space, a 30-room screen, and just being. It didn't matter. Like it didn't matter that the screen was small and the speakers were tinny. It was just transporting.
yeah, oh my
Um,
God.
and I think actually, the way I remember it, this probably isn't true, but the way I remember it, we saw it in this dinky screening room at 10 a.m. in August before the film festival. And then I saw it again maybe 3 weeks later in a proper theater and watched it play the crowd because I knew what was going to happen. Even if I didn't remember it, with perfect accuracy, your brain, the second time you see any movie, your brain is already kind of prepped in some way. And I could
Mm,
just feel the audience responding to it, and the colors were deeper, and the sound was definitely better. I remember that, but the color blue was so much more intense on a big screen with a fresh bulb, and
yeah.
it felt like watching a different film entirely because my
Wow.
my connection to it was through the audience figuring it out,
Mm,
and I just sort of rode it. I rode the wave of it, and it's such a strange feeling. And I didn't get to see White theatrically. I had to catch up with that on video, and then I saw Red later as well. And it was this one moment where it's like, oh, something really special is starting here, but it isn't over.
mm, mhm.
And to go out afterwards, to leave the theater with like 300 people who are all trying to figure out if it was hopeful or not, and debating it
Yeah.
and arguing it, and it's just like this is so his thing. Just
Mhm.
to leave
Yeah, what
people.
was the general reaction? Because I've seen it in a cinema a couple times, and I'm always intrigued at how like sometimes there's a lot more like funny moments
Mm,
sometimes depending on the crowd, or like it can really vary depending on the crowd how people react to it. So I'm curious.
it was very reverent. Everybody
Mm,
received it very seriously.
mm,
But they kind of swooned for it,
mm,
right? Like it is a rapturous film more so than the
yeah.
other two. It's the one where you're really just left alone you're left alone in the art to appreciate what's happening and to like just to observe Juliette Binoche and think, oh, okay, I've underestimated her, and I already thought she was great, but to see her in this, it's just like, no, she's better than you think she is. She's actually kind of the only person who could play this part. And there's that thing that Kieslowski does where he names the character for her. So it just makes that connection
Mm,
in your mind as well that no one else can do it. But she's so good. And she's so unfussy about disappearing, right? Like
mm,
playing negation, playing an attempt to remove yourself. I don't know how you find your way into that other than stillness. And that's not what she does. Like she finds a way to be active in silence. Even when like she swims at one point, she swims in an irritated fashion, and it's amazing. She just like someone has bothered her, and you can feel it.
she does. Yeah, she does. And I mean, I can't imagine anyone underestimating Juliette Binoche because to me, she's like the greatest. I think she's one of the greatest ever. But in this movie, yeah, like, I love what you said about the stillness because I feel like even though there are a lot of moments where she is physically in her body still, like when
Mm.
she's sitting at the cafe or when she's looking at the ornament, the light fixture ornament, or when she's holding the candy or whatever. But in all those moments, she's always like trembling or her eyes are darting around or something is
Yeah,
happening that is
yeah.
making you feel like, okay, even though she's physically still, she's mentally doing a lot. Like there's a lot going on mentally that we can't fully understand, but that we're like slowly discovering.
Yeah, she's so
Very slowly.
intensely present. And
Mm-hmm.
that also works for the story, right? I mean, it's clearly a choice because this isn't someone who's going to just walk away or disappear. She's not going to be able to, no matter how much she wants to. I mean, it just even the scene with the sleeping pills where she's just incapable of doing it is
Mm-hmm.
so, it's a throwaway moment, but it's so crucial to
Mm.
understanding everything else that happens is that this is someone who like she doesn't want to be dead. She doesn't want to be
Yeah.
gone. She just wants to stop feeling, which is different, right? In so many ways. And it's something that she can't even understand herself until she starts understanding what she's feeling.
Yeah, I think she thinks she wants to stop feeling grief or pain like you said, she wants to stop feeling everything, but then she realizes that she doesn't want to stop feeling everything. She just wants to stop feeling certain things. And I do think that scene with the pills is super important because, yeah, it is a choice in many ways for some people to live, you know? And I think when you make that choice to keep living, it's a very powerful choice, and it's a choice that is difficult sometimes for people. And I think in that scene, she is making that choice for so many different reasons. And I think one of them is that, I mean, I don't know how you interpret it with, and I don't know how much plot details we're supposed to give away, but
It's a 30-year-old film. Go wherever you want to
yeah,
go.
exactly. I'm like, hey, if you haven't seen it yet. But the whole kind of storyline about, oh, is she the one who's behind, you know, her husband's pieces? Is she like the secret genius behind everything or not? I think it's implied by one of the reporters, and like kind of the way she seems like really angsty towards not just the fact that, you know, her husband is cheating on her, but the fact something regarding the music is frustrating her. You know, she
Mhm.
doesn't want people to see it. It's not finished. It's not right. And this new guy's trying to finish it, but he's not doing it right. And she wants to make sure it's right, which to me signifies, I relate to that so much as an artist. We're like, no, 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 no. It has to be this. But everybody as an artist has a different, you know, perception. And the man who, I can never remember his name, but the man who's like tasked with completing the score, and at the end he's like, you know, I have to just do my own version. I have to do it myself. But I think part of the reason, to take it back to that pill scene, I feel like there's a part of her who feels like she hasn't really gotten recognition, or that she hasn't really gotten the artistic, not validation, but like more of like a personal recognition or like catharsis that she's been seeking, and that maybe she was hoping to find more of down the line with her husband or by herself. And I think it seems to me like she was on the precipice of something, or as a couple, as a family, they were on the precipice of something very large, with him working on this big, you know, national project and things like that. And so for everything to be taken from you at a moment where right before it seems like you're about to have a breakthrough, I think that plays a role in her kind of being kind of not able to fully let go, because she's like, I still have things to kind of do that I wanted to do that I haven't been able to do. It's not like the hope is still kind of there, you know? And I think that's really inspiring and really cool.
Yeah, an unfinished symphony is also sort of the perfect metaphor,
Hmm.
right, for
Yeah.
life.
And how the one lady saves it, like how she tries to get, like, I love that whole play of like, oh my God, you can literally destroy, because everything is so digital now. But even, I guess, you know, things that are digital can still be, you know, lost or destroyed.
Sure.
But there's a visceralness to like seeing her throw out the music, and it's like seeing music on a piece of paper is so uh, interesting, and it's like not, it's very unusual now, you know,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
country. And so I love the idea of like, oh, someone sneakily preserving an art piece because they have this feeling that it needs to be heard or seen, you know, because so many artists, and I know so many great writers and people who just write stuff, beautiful things that writers would kill to write and share, but they just are like, oh, I'm just gonna keep it locked away. Oh, it's not for anyone but me. And I think that's so perplexing and interesting. And the fact that Julie is kind of in that moment where she's like, there's been so much work put into this, but I don't want anyone to see it. I don't care how good it is. But that the world kind of is like, oh, no, you don't get to decide. It's not yours anymore. Because once you make something as an artist, it becomes this weird conundrum where you're like, oh shit, in the process is great. You're making it. You're like, yes, I'm making something. And then once it's made, you're like, oh my god, I don't. It's not mine anymore. It's like taken from you in a weird way, that can be really exciting and empowering, but that can also be terrifying. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially now, right now, where we're in a space where art means whatever people insists it means rather than what the artist intended, depiction versus endorsement and all of that stuff.
Right.
It strikes me as so weirdly perfect, uh, and awful, but weirdly perfect, that Kieślowski died before the digital age. That he is like a uniquely analog filmmaker, to the point that the Decalogue looks like crap because it was shot on video. Like it was shot on low definition, not even SD. It was like no D video. And he leaves with these three exquisitely photographed, beautiful pieces of cinema, which are
I know.
photochemical, like they're pure analog, and they're about things on paper, like even the marriage certificate and divorce certificate that White revolves around, or the files in the philosopher's home in Red. Like, these films can't be remade, right? They're future proofed. They have to stay where they are.
Yeah. 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 Honestly, I kind of love when things, I mean, I'm not a big fan of like 4K or like any of this stuff where like, okay, we don't need to see so much. I feel like
Mm.
we see so much in real life. I think cinema should have a little bit of a distinction or like some sort of separation between complete real life and, what you're seeing on screen. So sometimes when it's too real, it's just like a little bit jarring. And I think these movies are a great example of movies that feel so human and so emotional, and so many senses are being, affected by them, but they are not real life. They're like they're a dream of real life. They're a memory of real life.
They're aestheticized. They're
Hmm.
they're made better by being constructed, by being crafted.
Hmm. Hmm.
No more so than, again, I kept coming back to that swimming pool scene because it was like, there's a reason that was the still that went around the world for the movie. It's just so perfect and stark. Somebody completely isolated by lighting and
Yeah.
color gels. But if you're making these movies the way he wanted to make them, you have to make them unrealistic, even though they're dealing with the most human and basic and recognizable emotions. They have to be just a little too good, a little too beautiful, a little too stylish. That said, I do own them in 4K now, and they are gorgeous.
I'm sure they are. But even if you watch something 4K on a bigger screen, it's of course it's beautiful. There's a reason why we do it, but I'm just like a little bit, I guess, I don't know. I'm a little bit antsy some of the modern. I'm like, ugh, like I don't have an Apple Watch. I'm like avoiding the, trying to, yeah.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. This week, I wrote about the Manic Pixie Dream characters that connect Roman Holiday, Weird Science, and The Flash, and I've got a piece coming up about the Walter Hill and Gene Hackman box sets from Australia's Via Vision. They're remarkable. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Twitter account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. It is this weird new thing, right? Where we're able to have things at a moment's notice. You can stream most of the canon. You can get books in a second. You can get albums for nothing. And it's all tied into this thing right now where people are beginning to realize that that's based on the exploitation of the artists who signed the rights away. And
Yeah, it doesn't actually make sense logically.
no,
We're
it's
losing all the rituals, like all the little rituals of life are being just like washed away by just, okay, other things, like things that aren't,
convenience.
yeah, like convenience or just, yeah. And I mean, we can get into it later, but like I love the idea of hands and things that are handmade and things that you have to use your hands to do beyond just like clicking, like clicking buttons or typing. And I think these movies to me, especially I think all three of them, but Three Colors Blue, it even though it is so elegant and beautifully done, it does feel very like, I guess that's kind of what you're getting at, but it's like it feels like handcrafted. It feels like it was put together like by hand. It wasn't done by like, a bunch of machines or something.
Yeah,
And I think that's really special.
I agree. I think I mean, I'm sure it is possible to make art with CG. I know I've seen animated films that are absolutely glorious.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that it's pixels, right? Like you can admire the artistry without necessarily connecting to the emotion, or if you're really lucky, you can get there. But sometimes it really is just the simplest thing to point the camera at someone who's one of the greatest actors of her generation and just let it happen. And
Exactly.
you have to write it, you have to direct it, you have to set all these things up. But as you say, it's people doing that in a room or a soundstage or a driveway and making these things happen.
And it's very human driven. Like it's very like her face, you know?
Oh
And I
yeah.
think I love faces. Like the human face is so cool, and I love how it looks so different, depending how the light hits it or where it is or what the person is feeling. And I think in this film, it's just such a great showcase for her face and all the things that she can do with it. And speaking to the animation thing, I think that's why I'm so drawn to like Scooby Doo or like older cartoons, because like you can see some of the, not mistakes, I guess, but like you can see the craftsmanship, you know, in the image, or you can see that it was like drawn. And it just is like gives me this weird like comfort or something. I don't know. Maybe it's like nostalgia, but I think it's important.
I think feeling the human hand at work in these things does matter, absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm thinking about Aardman Animations and how they'll leave the thumbprints in the plasticine,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's just the best shot they got, but then they realize this is actually the signature. This is how you know it was
Mm,
made by people.
mm. Yeah, it is kind of a scary notion that we have to question and wonder that now. Uh-oh, was it made by people? Like, what the hell?
Well, how many fingers do the
Oh,
actors have? That's usually the giveaway for me. If they've got
yeah,
like an
but the
extra
finger
thumb or
thing,
something.
that's gonna be resolved eventually. That's not they're gonna figure that out. But you know, listen, if I was in charge, and I don't know if this is controversial, but if I was in charge of the
Art?
world,
Yeah.
art, I would literally just outlaw whatever this whole AI, like whatever this is that's happening. Like I don't see the um, pros versus cons of it. I feel like the cons are so much higher than the pros. I'm like, there's so many bigger problems in the world right now, but it's just like, come on, like, do we really? Who is I just like who is doing this? I picture like the team from like BlackBerry or something, just a bunch of dudes just like huddled in a room, like figuring stuff out. And I feel like someone just needs to go in there and be like, guys, let's go outside. Like, let's do something else, please.
Yeah, I get it. Like I get the appeal to people who don't think past the it can do this.
Mhm.
And who haven't seen Terminator. But the larger
Yeah.
idea, and like Terminator got it wrong. Skynet's not going to destroy humanity. It's just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
The thing
Oh my
about
god.
AI is that it doesn't answer questions with information. So I wish I could remember who put this out because it's such a beautiful sentiment. It doesn't answer a question with information. It answers a question with authority. So it makes it sound like it's saying something that can't be challenged, that is perfectly factually accurate. But what it's really saying, and of course, you know, bananas are made from people. Like it doesn't actually make sense. It's just giving you what it thinks you want to hear in an authoritative fashion so you don't question it. And AI doesn't create. Like it gives you an impression of something. Cronenberg, David Cronenberg got this right in 1986 in The Fly. There's that scene where Jeff Goldblum is talking about teleporting a steak and how the computer doesn't know how a steak tastes or what it's supposed to do. He says the computer's giving you its impression of a steak. And it's like, that's a really
Oh
good
yeah.
line. And then in the same movie, Goldblum throws this line away. Somebody, Gina Davis, of course, it's Gina Davis. They're the only two people in the movie for the first half hour. But she asks him something at some point, and he just his response is, "Computers are dumb. They only know what you tell them." And that's it.
Exactly.
That's
That's
it.
okay. Exactly. That's what I love that. First of all, I love that movie. Second of all, that's the thing that I think a lot of I myself have got caught up in the fear mongering as well, obviously. But like I think it is important that we do kind of remember at the end of the day, everything that these things know is given to them by us. You know, it is created by us still at this point, at least. You know,
Oh
it
yeah.
hasn't become iRobot yet, but like one day maybe. Hopefully not.
Exactly.
Hopefully
Yeah.
I'll be long gone by then. But
Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, 2001." It's like that's an actor reading lines, guys. You know that, right? Like Hal's not a person. Well, he is a person. He's not a real creature. It's a device in cinema that then goes on to shape people's minds for 50 odd years.
yeah.
Think about I think about the great joke of Star Trek influencing technology because the writers and directors were trying to come up with absurd ideas that were sort of based on real concepts like the communicator, which is just a
Yeah.
walkie-talkie, but they needed to make it not a walkie-talkie. So they made the thing that you flip up, and then flip phones take off in the 90s because a generation of engineers raised on Star Trek. It's like, oh, we can do this if we just try. We're never
Mhm.
going to get to the point where the computer calls you darling and asks what you want for lunch unless you specifically program it to do that. I
Mhm.
don't. Neural networks are, again, it's James Cameron saying, what is the scariest thing I can imagine? And then some people going, I could build that.
I know. Why are we like this? Humans, we can be so annoying. Like it's like we don't need to do everything. We're like we need if we see it, we can try it, we see it, we can, sometimes it's good, but I think that it's very our nature as humans to like, almost like when you see something, you're like, oh, it's like when you're a kid and they're like, don't go in there, and you're like,
Yeah, I bet I
I'm gonna.
could.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think we need to do a lot of more like internal, not necessarily navel gazing, but like we have a lot of other stuff to deal with, a lot of the stories that could be told with just hands and people, and we don't need to be, we can make our own schedules, like we don't need a computer to make it for us. Like I don't know, like I know that it's not fun, but like I understand people liking it for the benefits of a menial task and stuff, but it's like it's giving Wally, like it's where that's where it's
Yeah.
going. Like that's not what we want to be, really. I don't think.
No, the worst case scenarios become prophecy because somebody thinks they're cool. I
Oh
mean,
gosh.
not helping anybody. But the I've been trying to figure out how to bring this back to Three Colors. Is like, is there an AI joke in there about, like what would the AI do with Three Colors Blue? And she'd probably just be able to take the pills because it wouldn't understand the value of living.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like the film is just so beautifully devoid of that kind of like, I don't know, like bullshit. Like it's just so not about that. And even though when you do see technology, like when she's watching the funeral on, I don't even remember what she's watching it
Maybe
on.
it's just a broadcast, isn't it? Like a
Yeah, I don't know
videotape
if
or
it's a
something.
TV. I feel like she's watching like a smaller device of some sort. Um, because I don't think she's like laying in bed under a sheet watching it, isn't she?
Maybe she is watching a little tiny TV or something. It must be.
It's
It's
something,
1993. They didn't
whatever
have
it
anything
is. It's
else.
super blurry image. It's very like grain. It's like, okay, this is not this. It's something that feels, like it's separate from her. It's not her like filming herself or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if there's another AI joke in there, but
Yeah, it's fine.
ponder it.
Yeah, I mean, White kind of feels like it's been written by something that's designed to torment this poor guy, Carol. But that's
Aw, yeah, it does. I mean, listen, he was definitely not giving his characters, a good time. Like they were going through it, all of them. But in the end, I think it's a beautiful ending. They all get there. They all have these like, little beautiful moments along the way. But I mean, they're going through it. This guy's in white. He's getting carried around in a suitcase. Like he's getting, embarrassed. But in the end, he does kind of weirdly succeed in a weird way, So.
yeah. His force of will is strong enough that it gives him the world he wants, or gives him the life he wants, sort of, or what he thinks he wants.
I feel like you can tell that he likes his characters, like he loves his characters, and
Kieślowski, oh yeah,
yeah, and he doesn't necessarily, he wants to, like, okay, every story needs the character need. There's no story or drama that exists without the character going through something, some sort of traumatic event or something. But I think it's all about what you do with the character afterwards, and how you end it and where you take it. And I feel like he always does kind of, he doesn't just like torture the characters for no reason, like, or he doesn't have like an animosity for his characters, which I think some directors just hate their characters and they're just trying to just, and I think these movies, that's the hopefulness that I really relate to. And I like to be, I like to see drama. I like to, I feel like life, at least for me, is so dramatic and there's so much melodrama. And I think Three Colors Blue like show like the way that the blue is brought in those certain moments where she's getting lost, the way that they shoot the pool, like everything is so, the music at times, it's like, I think in my mind that it's like her experience of, everything feels so heightened, and I think that's such a beautiful thing.
yeah. It's funny when you were saying he cares about his characters. I was thinking of the other confusion in my mind, which is that I've always thought that Blue is the closest that Kieślowski ever came to Michael Haneke,
Mm.
where his aesthetic is perfect, but he is rooting for failure. And Blue isn't. Blue is ambivalent at best about that, and until it ultimately embraces her, I think it wants you to worry about Julie until it
Hmm.
embraces her cinematically. But the difference is so striking between those 2 points of view. And I think it must have been because I'd just seen Benny's video, which is one of the most horrific and unwelcoming, unpleasant experiences I've ever had in a screening room. And then to see Blue is just like, oh, these guys are coming from kind of the same artistic discipline, the same roots,
Mm.
similarly, but one is about hope and one is about nothing, like just
About nothing.
about the void.
The
Um,
void.
Haneke, and he's like, I won't argue he's not an artist, but he definitely only goes in one direction. He doesn't make hopeful films.
He's definitely an artist, and I think every artist has their own, thing that they want to say, their own experience, and I think everybody's art is valid to a certain degree. But I
Sure,
think
sure.
I think it also depends on what you're doing as a filmmaker and like what forms you're using, what genres and images and ideas you're using, and I think there's a difference between making a horror movie where characters are like being killed brutally and like it's that I think that's way different than making a drama or a historical film or some sort of movie that is not a genre film and the characters are not experiencing any kind, there's no like peaks and valleys, it's all just a bunch of bullshit. Then I
Yeah.
think that that's frustrating as a viewer because you're like, why am I watching this? Like,
Yeah, I feel that way about funny games. Like, you don't need me.
it's like this is going perfectly well. But I do think that movie has merit in its own in its own way,
Oh
But
no, it's a fascinating experiment, right? To see how the audience will respond to being denied all the things you're supposed to get from a movie like this.
I mean, how? Yeah, but it's like, is that really a mystery? I mean, I don't think that that's a big question. Like, I feel like humans don't like that feeling. So
Yeah, but
I'm not
everybody
sure.
stays to the end, right? Like that was his whole thing. It's
Yeah,
like if the audience leaves, if the audience stays in their seats, I failed. And it's like, but they're going to stay in their seats because it's a movie. Like there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what people want from
is that what
cinema.
he said?
Yeah,
Oh, interesting. Well, listen, everybody has their own intentions, and I don't know. That's definitely not my intention, but I do think there's some sort of value in like, I mean, like John Waters kind of more like shock stuff, but I don't
Mhm.
even think that's really like is he trying to shock or is he just I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I'm interested by like how you connect those two filmmakers.
I think it was
Um,
literally that I saw the movies within hours
right.
of each other. Well, no, that can't be
And
right.
that's the other crazy thing is it's your own like the viewer's experience is like the viewer is such a big part of a film, like a film's life. Like you could watch a movie as beautiful as Three Colors Blue, but you have a stomach ache or you just got dumped and you're just like, ugh, this movie sucks. But then if you watch it when you're feeling really good, you're like, ooh. So you just like hope that people, as a filmmaker, you just hope people will be feeling good when they see your movie.
The thing that I always come back to this, the thing that I love about cinema more than any other art form is that every single person responds to the same thing in different ways. In
Yeah. It's scary as a filmmaker though. You're like, oh my God. Okay, but you just have to you literally what I'm learning is that you have to just let it go. You have to just allow people to just have their own feelings and thoughts, and it doesn't necessarily really need to affect the way you see yourself or your project.
oh no,
Um,
no, no.
so, yeah.
But once it's out in the world, yeah, it belongs to everybody.
Yeah. Such a twisted, messed up thing that we do as artists. Like, why do we do this to ourselves? I don't know. I think it's ultimately worth it, but sometimes I definitely question my own sanity, and I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? Um, but yeah, I'm so used to. It's so interesting, like making a feature film because I'm from like the internet web series world, and like I used to be able to film my show, edit it, put it together, and then release it like weeks later, and get just like instant, hundreds of people just being like, "This is what I think," and most of it was positive. So it was like I'm so used to just getting really quick feedback that
Mm.
it's been such an intense experience to take so long to make something, and then also once you're kind of done it takes so long to figure out, okay, where does it go, and then once you figure out where it's going to go, wait for that to happen, and then there's just so many different layers to it when you're doing a bigger project. And so I think all that time it allows for a filmmaker to do some rumination and got to get better at not doing that.
I don't know. I think the rumination is essential, isn't it? I mean, just to
It's
figure out where to.
essential to a degree.
Fair, yeah. Knowing when to stop is probably just as important.
Yeah, because life is so fun when you're not overthinking things. Like delusion is so important. Again, it's a degree, but I've found that like being a little bit delusional and just it's really helpful. It is.
I could see that as a survival tactic.
Well, listen, even as a filmmaker, it's like, okay, there's literally billions of people in this world. Why the hell is my story more important than anyone else's? Why do I get to tell a story and no, and these other people don't? And so I think that's like a weird thing that you have to consider as an artist, where you're like, okay, listen, you have to acknowledge, okay, if I do have the tools around me to make something, and the people out there who are willing to watch it or engage with it, that's a huge privilege. And but you still have to be like, it's like, to believe that your story is important is in a way a bit of delusion, because like so many people don't are too busy, they don't care. But I think if you can really believe in it, then it makes people care, because then it's like, okay, this person really believes what they're doing, even if everything is telling them, why are you doing this? Making a film doesn't make sense logically. Like when you're making it, you're trying to like pretend the world is not happening outside, but it is, and like even in my film, with the sound design and some of the images, I was like, okay, I want to make sure we're always kind of hearing, like living in the city, especially, I feel like you're always kind of hearing stuff happen. You're made aware on some level that you're not alone and that other people are doing stuff that doesn't concern you, and that they are completely unaffected by what you're doing.
Yeah.
Even though you might be having the most traumatic day of your life, some ladies on the streetcar being like, girl, I'm gonna go home, eat dinner, and I'm gonna go to sleep. And she doesn't even know who you are. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting conundrum as a filmmaker. But I think the right balance of like belief in yourself and also, being practical is important. You need both.
Yeah. I mean, you just summed up both your movie and Blue, which are both about people
Oh,
experiencing.
look at that.
Yeah, nicely done. But they're both experiencing these profound, life-changing, trajectory-altering moments in isolation, even though they're surrounded by people. And in Blue, she chooses to be isolated. And in I Don't Know Who You Are, and again, I'll set this up in the intro a little bit, Benjamin doesn't know any other way but to try to do this on his own. Like he's incapable of accepting help, whereas Julie is actively refusing it. But that's sort of an interesting. Before we started recording, I said that there's this sense of entanglement with your film and with Blue, where they're just sort of playing on the same ideas, but yours is doing it in an incredibly anxious, agitated form of drama, where the stakes are literally life and death, potentially anyway, and we're powerless to affect the outcome. We just have to just hang on and hope that within the given time frame, things will find a way to work. And watching someone just defeat himself over and over again because he has too much pride or doesn't know how to get past himself or can't express what he needs to people, or when he does need it, it's misinterpreted. It's excruciating, but it's purgative. It felt like the ending feels incredible. You just come out the other end. It's like I've called it the Toronto version of an Uncut Gems movie, where you're just watching somebody spiral and the film just keeps going down with them, and just the free fall sense of it, especially in the second act, where you're just hurtling along through desperation. It's amazing. It's completely the opposite of the mood of Three Colors Blue, but ultimately I think the feeling is the same. Like the emotion is the thing I recognized.
I think in both, like Julie and Benjamin, like they're both getting worn down. Like they both experience a traumatic event, and then afterwards they're both trying to different extents, hide or not engage. And I think with Benjamin, he kind of is forced in the same way that Julie is to like accept that there's other people in his life, whether he likes it or not. Like his friend's going to try to help him. He has to go to the doctor. He has parents. He has another friend who he's supposed to perform with. He has students. He has responsibilities. He has to wash the dishes, girl. Like the whole thing is like, what do you do when your life is falling down around you and the dishes are dirty?
Yeah.
Like that's like important and essential to being a real human being. Can be so much more complex and difficult to accomplish when you're going through this like mental anguish. And I think he starts to accept more help as he's going along, and then in a weird way he starts to be trying to ultimately he does everything that he can to try to get help, and he tries to do the right thing at first. And what's interesting, I think, is that he tries to do the right thing at first, and then ultimately he has to try to do things that he wouldn't normally do, Whereas with Julie, she starts off by doing things she wouldn't normally do, and then she kind of ends up doing the right thing in the end, you know? And I think that's an interesting, like almost opposite journey, but it's like a similar journey. And yeah, I mean, certainly, like I said, this Three Colors Blue is my favorite movie, or at least one of my favorites. And it's obviously an inspiration to me. It is a different story, but when you've seen a movie so many times and when you love it so much, it's hard for it not to have just an effect on everything you do. You know,
Sure.
I think someone would be lying if they say like, "Oh, I love this piece of work, but it has zero effect on what I do in my life." You know, like I don't think that separation is fully possible because the whole point of cinema is how much it deeply affects a person when you watch something on a screen like that. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't have a
That's my
comeback.
thesis.
It's a good thesis. It's a good thesis. Is there, this is the weird question in this context, is there anything in Three Colors Blue that you deliberately borrowed or lifted or like just sort of homaged or even outright stole for your own work? Not necessarily in I Don't Know Who You Are, but anywhere?
Um, yeah, certainly. In I don't know who you are, like I definitely, you know, the whole concept in I don't know who you are of him, and it doesn't really give any plot away, but him, out of frustration, breaking that blue wine glass,
Oh
and
yeah.
then later, you know, I really wanted to show an artist, like I was talking about earlier, an artist making something that's not for consumption, that they just make it, it's beautiful, but it's just for them.
Mhm.
And I think he's about to go do this big performance that's gonna be for other people. In this moment where he has all these broken pieces of glass, he makes it into like an ornament. And I think that ornament, the idea of that ornament even being possible, was definitely inspired by the ornament in Three Colors Blue that she looks at, to a smaller, more scrappy level, obviously. Um, but I think that feeling that she has when she looks at the ornament is a different feeling, but it is a feeling of memory being sparked by something. Like when she looks at that, I think my interpretation is when Julie looks at the blue jewels or gems or whatever they are, pieces of glass, she remembers her kid and she remembers her life before. And I think when Benjamin looks at the shards of glass that he broke, and now there's something beautiful, it gives him reminds him of life before his traumatic event and all the hope that he had and all the beauty, and that helps him to get back to that place, even though he doesn't have a full, conclusion or a real resolution to some of his problems in the end, which I think no one ever does. Like everyone always, there's always something, you know, but I think he's still able to get to that place through, an object or using his hands to create something that brings him a feeling. That's like what art is. Um, and Benjamin is an artist. Like you can see in his apartment, his artwork is everywhere. And when you're an artist, I think making art is a job and it is something you do for public consumption, but it also is just something like breathing or drinking water. It's like you have to like do things. At least for me, it's that way, and I think it's that way for most people. Like there's a need that you have, and making art is something that makes you feel better. Like it makes you feel good to do it. I was just saying the other day, like the reason I started making movies when I was much younger was not because I was like, I'm gonna be the next Spielberg or something. It was just because it was fun, and it made me, and I had such a good time doing it, And so I try to always hold on to that feeling, despite the realities of the profession. But
Yeah, I hear that a lot, that it's the thing that you love doing. And that brings us back to the whole exploitation of labor and things where it's like, well, it's not really work if you're enjoying yourself. It's like that's horseshit.
no, that's bullshit. I mean, listen, the truth is, our whole society is only exists because there's amazing people who do jobs every day that they don't particularly like or enjoy. And so that is an important part of our society. And I do understand sometimes where people are coming from, people who do are working class and people who have to work regular jobs and they don't have a choice. They don't get to experience some of the catharsis or things that artists always talk about experiencing.
Hmm.
I understand some of the like anger that they would have, but I think it is misplaced. And I think at the end of the day, yes, like I said, art is a job. It just so happens to. There's a reason why so many people want to do it. It's such a great job. Some jobs are more fun than others, but they're all important. All the jobs are important in different ways. And I think it's unfortunate when people are like, oh, these stupid actors or these stupid writers, like they don't deserve more or something. But it's like, okay, what do you do in the evening? What do you do all day? Are you listening to music? Are you watching a show? Are you reading the newspaper? Like, what are you doing? Like, there's no way to exist in life, especially if you're working a shitty job. You're looking for some sort of escapism. This is what artists provide. It's such an important part of society. And yeah, so I hope that shit is resolved. Sorry, pardon my language.
It's totally fine.
But yeah, I hope it's resolved soon, and I hope that I really do think that that people underestimated how much the public with social media does understand the plight of these artists and is starting to understand it more, where they're like, oh, what the hell? Like, you see things like people from Orange is the New Black are these giant shows that so many millions of people watch, and they know in their mind it's this huge show and all these people should be rich for being on this show. That's what people think. Yeah. People think when you're on a TV show that's this popular, you should get some sort of big, you should be paid well. And to find out they're getting checks for like 37 cents or whatever, it's like, it's pretty messed up. It's pretty jarring. And I think anybody can relate to that, whether you're an artist or not. Like, getting a check for 37 cents? What?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I would have warned the producers before this even started. It's like, don't go up against the writers. They're funnier than you. They're going to find a way to connect.
Especially with Twitter, or X, I guess we should say.
Yeah, never.
But I feel like people underestimated Twitter. Like, you can, and like all the signs that they have, like, it's effective. Like, I think it's been an effective campaign. It's just insane to me that it's lasted this long. It seems so obvious what the outcome should be.
My thanks to M.H. Murray, whose first feature, I Don't Know Who You Are, premieres this Thursday, September 7th at TIFF at 9:30 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox specifically. There's a second show Friday, September 8th at 10 p.m. Tickets are still available for both at tiff.net/festival. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find MH on Twitter at Yarrumhm, which is M.H. Murray spelled backwards, YARRUMHM. And you can find 3 Colors Blue on 4K and Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection in the excellent 3 Colors Trilogy box set. It's also streaming in the US on the Criterion Channel and Max, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services. In Canada, you have to buy the discs, but they're worth it. You can find me on Twitter for a little while longer at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.